Welcome to my listening series. The following is an excerpt from Justice Calls. Chapter 1. This is Richie's blood. Ari Adams turned over the large plastic bag, the word evidence written in bold script across a label slapped haphazardly to one side. The bag contained a portion of her dead brother Richie's baseball collection, his 1992 Dodger stack, made crimson when he dropped to the floor after being shot. Most of the cards had congealed, but she could still read the name on the top card, Darryl Strawberry, Richie's favorite player. He would routinely lay the trading cards across the kitchen table, like a version of solitaire only he understood, his somber expression conveying the importance of his work. She'd imagined he was memorizing his baseball statistics. While he collected cards for all the teams, his favorite was the Dodgers. He'd coveted the Strawberry card and always kept it on the top of his stack. He had the entire 1992 Dodger team, except for Eric Karros, the first baseman. Richie had died searching for that last card. Her hands shook as she set the bag on the floor, his beloved cards defaced by his own blood. She raced downstairs to the bathroom. A strong whiff of pine suggested her father's cleaning lady had visited recently. She leaned over the toilet, but the sick feeling passed. It was time for a break. She headed for the kitchen and a glass of water, mulling over her actions. Have I committed burglary? She had a key to her father's house, and she had a specific reason for her visit today, to water his two ferns, Lucy and Ethel. He was vacationing with his new girlfriend, Dylan Phillips, Phoenix's chief of police. It was a test to see if they could travel together. Ari liked Dylan and had come to terms with her father's romantic involvement with someone who wasn't her mother. After Lucia died from cancer, Jack Adams had closed off his heart until he met the new chief. But Ari had an ulterior motive for her visit. She was here for answers, one her cop father wouldn't provide. She headed back upstairs to Jack's office and opened a window, welcoming the fresh scents of spring and allowing the cool April morning breeze to circulate throughout the room. It provided a counterbalance to the tableau on the floor, the evidence bag of bloody baseball cards, Richie's Dodger hat, a scrapbook, and Jack's case file. She set aside the evidence bag of cards. Why is this here, she thought. Richie's murder was an open case, a cold case definitely, but no one had been convicted, even accused of his murder. Ari had suspected Jack was secretly investigating the case. This was her proof. She picked up the Dodger hat, the one he wore every day, even to bed. She brought it to her cheek and the tears flowed as she remembered. He'd gone to the 7-Eleven around 9 p.m., his allowance burning a hole in his pocket. It was summer, and he'd been sure that he'd find the Eric Karros card. He begged her to go with him, knowing that Jack and Lucia would probably agree to the trip if his 12-year-old big sister went with him. He'd wanted to go to a 7-Eleven that was an extra 10 blocks away, almost to the northern edge of Glendale. But she'd said no. So for the first time in his life, he'd defied their parents and left through his bedroom window. If only I'd gone with him, she thought. She cried until her tears turned to ragged breaths. She inhaled a sharp, musty odor from the cap. If I'd only been a good sister, he would still be here. She placed the cap on top of the cards and opened the scrapbook to Richie's second grade school picture and his obituary. She loved that picture. His smile was natural despite 2 missing teeth. It would have been unnecessary for the photographer to coax a grin from him. He lived in a constant state of happiness. He was 8 and innocent. He wore his dark brown hair longer than most boys, and curly locks covered his ears. She closed the scrapbook and picked up the case file. As a former police officer, she knew what she'd find there, including the grisly photos of the night he died. She guessed the file weighed a few pounds and imagined it was complete. Although Jack had worked for Phoenix PD, he had many friends amidst the various law enforcement agencies in the metropolitan area, including their home city of Glendale, where Richie died. She imagined a sympathetic brother in blue had copied the file for Jack. She shuffled through the top pages of the file and found the composite sketch provided by the clerk, one she'd seen several times on the news during the first month of the investigation. There was nothing memorable about the killer's face, but she'd forgotten about the baseball cap. Covering his close-cropped brown hair was a green ball cap with a John Deere logo. In the back of the file were the crime scene photos. She knew there would be several of Richie lying in his own blood, including the one she'd seen when she was 12. She wasn't sure she could or should look. It had been so long ago. She'd cataloged a series of memories, each one serving a different purpose, whether it was to cheer herself up, build her self-esteem, or motivate herself to finish a task. Ironically, her dead brother had become her life coach. She worried the crime scene photos would forever taint her perfect pictures. What about justice, she thought. She pulled out the thick stack of photos. Several showed the 7-Eleven's interior. The harsh fluorescent lighting obscured the finer details, but enough was visible to jog her memory. She'd been in the store frequently until Richie's death. Now it all came back. The ice cream case, the Slurpee machine, and the candy aisle. How many times had she stood with Richie in front of the baseball trading cards? She flipped to the next photo. There he was, face down. Wisps of curly brown hair rested on the collar of his striped polo shirt. His hands outstretched, the baseball cards around him. In the corner of the photo were 3 trading card packs, still in their wrappers, the ones he intended to purchase. She frowned and grabbed the evidence bag. She couldn't see any cards in a wrapper. Where are they? She moved through the next several photos, her emotions detaching as she theorized about what might have become of the missing packets. When she came upon the familiar photo of his face, her lips parted and a wail burst forth. She slapped the photo over face down. No clues would come from staring into his soft brown eyes. The final set of pictures were of the 7-Eleven's exterior. There was little to see except the empty parking lot, the back dumpster, and the side lot, which contained an old sedan that Ari surmised belonged to the store clerk. A shot of the storefront showed Richie's abandoned Schwinn just to the right of the front door. He hadn't planned to be there very long, and he'd already broken curfew, so it wasn't surprising that he'd neglected to park the bike in a rack and lock it. The beginning of a headache tweaked her skull. She scooped up the reports and pictures and shoved everything back in the file. She debated whether to take it with her. Would her father miss it? She guessed he didn't review Richie's case on a regular basis. He'd often told her the best way to catch a break on a cold case was to periodically reread the file. Eventually, he said, a lead will jump out at you. And I found one, she thought, but she hadn't shown the movie to anyone yet. Ari decided to take the file and the scrapbook to see if anything jumped out at her. Then she'd return it all before her father got home. She picked up the cards and hat. She'd take the cards as they might provide clues, but she couldn't decide whether or not to take the hat. Sentimentality won out, and she set it on top of the file. She resituated the bottom of the drawer and saw a folded paper that had fallen out with everything else. It was a handwritten note in Jack's chicken scratch. Ari, if you're reading this, it's time to talk. Thank you for joining me for this listening session. I hope you'll subscribe to my channel and listen to some of my other readings.